There are many variations on the Bluescreen process, but in general, the procedure is as follows. The foreground action scene is staged in front of a blue backing and photographed on a color negative stock. The color negative is then sent to either an optical printer or an electronic scanner and computer workstation for compositing into the scene. In either case, the matte, of course, is the key element in this process, and it may help to explain in more detail how we build it. Let's look at some enlargements of the elements on the overhead projector. First, we take the original negative, which has the familiar orange cast to it that facilitates printing the negative to a color print film. For this demonstration, we've made a version of the negative that has the orange cast removed. When I place a blue filter over it, we can see that the blue areas of the image will be able to print through to the black and white Hicon film. The result will be this image, in which the windows, where the blue screen was seen, are clear, and, as we can see immediately, it could not serve as a matte because there's obvious exposure in a number of places besides the blue screen. We can see lights, for example, where there was as much blue exposure as there was from the blue screen itself, and we can also see blue spill all over the floor where the screen was being reflected back to the camera. Besides all that, it's obvious that there's a blue component throughout the whole image. What makes it possible to make the matte, however, is that there's also a red and green component to all these non-blue screen areas of the image. Being at the opposite end of the spectrum from blue, the red component constitutes a sort of chromatic negative of the blue positive we just made. So, if we take our negative and add a red filter, we can see those areas of the image that will print as clear in a red Hicon positive, namely the lights, where there was also as much red exposure as there was blue, and also these areas on the floor where we had blue spill, but where we also had the red exposure that's under the blue spill. On the other hand, there's no red exposure in the blue screen area, so this area will print as black in the red Hicon positive. Now this image wouldn't work as a matte for the same reasons in reverse that the blue Hicon print wouldn't work. There's exposure or lack of it in the wrong places in the image. We're all familiar with the fact that a photographic negative and its positive will cancel each other out if we superimpose them. Well, with color film, we have 3 color records. In fact, 3 different films stacked on top of each other, and thus we can have 6 potential images, the 3 positives plus the 3 negatives, and each of these will be different. It's this difference we're able to exploit in order to make our mattes. So, as we can observe here, what the original negative sandwiched together with a red filter and a Hicon positive made from the blue record of the same negative have in common is that the blue screen area is clear in both cases, but elsewhere the combination of the positive and negative images cancel each other out. Therefore, when we expose this to another piece of black and white 5369, the result will be something we call a number 1 burn-in matte, which is reversed to form a holdout matte. By combining these 2 mattes on the overhead projector, we can illustrate a very important consideration in the mattes that's revealed by this fine white line that we can observe here. This represents a very slight space between the 2 mattes, which results in an overlapping or double exposure of just the very edges of the foreground and background images. By contrast, if the matte images were actually to overlap each other, the result would be an area of the composite image that received no exposure, and thus would be rendered as black. In this way, fringing or matte lines are eliminated. By modifying the exposure and development of the matte image, it's possible to adjust the size of this gap, and this process is known as sizing the matte. By the way, the image we've been using for this illustration is from the 1986 Mel Brooks film Spaceballs, in which Peter Donen was the effects supervisor.